you know you love each other, but something's missing. Whether you are or are not arguing, whether you are or are not in crisis, what you do know is that you cannot say that you're exactly in love either. And somewhere in your head you wonder, is it the lack of sex? Is it that we don't talk like we used to? Well, maybe, but maybe not. And sometimes considering these as the only culprits puts us in deadlock. Because the way life is right now, maybe we are not in a phase of having deep conversations. Maybe sex is not something that we prioritize or need or can engage in for whatever reason at this particular time. Of course, we want to get back to that, and that is the ultimate goal. But if we're not there now, and that is what we believe is the only way that we can salvage the relationship, if we believe that that is the problem, and so if we don't see how in the world we can get back there, then that starts to sound quite hopeless, doesn't it? What if I told you, though, that there is a way out of this maze? That the intimacy that you're craving doesn't necessarily come from having more sex or having deeper conversations, but from something far more accessible, especially in this season of life. That is what we're exploring today. Hi there! If this is your first time here, welcome to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Markella Kaplani, a psychologist, a parenthood and relationship coach, and a parent myself. Together, we explore the transformative journey of parenthood and its profound impact on our relationship with ourselves, our partners, and our children, so that we can be present and show up as we envision without having to do more. Let's get into today's episode. Hello there, and welcome back to the Parenthood and Relationship Podcast. Today, we're unpacking one of the most common and quiet aches in long-term relationships. That space between we're fine and we're close. That gray zone where the marriage still functions, but the emotional glue has started to loosen, where affection is mostly practical and desire feels almost like a memory. We don't necessarily have problems, but we're not exactly well either. We're not alive. Many couples come to me in this in-between, asking, is it the lack of sex? Do we need to be having more deep talks, conversations, more intentional time? And while all of that can help, it's not the whole story. And it's definitely not the starting point. Because intimacy, real intimacy, isn't the same as sex. And that might actually be the best news you've heard in a while. Let's start with this common belief that if you're not having sex or enough sex, or if you're not having long, vulnerable, deep conversations, then you're in trouble. You're disconnected. That if you're not physically or emotionally performing intimacy in a very specific way, then you must not be close. But what happens when you're in the deep in parenting? When you're tired and your minds are overstimulated and the idea of initiating sex or a conversation that's longer than 5 minutes feels like too much? Most couples panic. They think, we've lost it. Or worse, maybe this is just how it's going to be now. But I am here to reassure you that intimacy isn't measured by how often we have sex or not. It's not about perfectly timed vulnerability either. It's about whether you see each other, whether you still choose each other in those small and unseen moments. If you still hold space for the idea of us when life is loud. Now, this might strike you as odd, but there's a quiet grief that lies in this space. And I want to name it. It's the grief of, we're not bad, but we're not doing great either. It's mourning the honeymoon phase and worrying that you've gone to feeling like roommates with someone that you used to adore. It's a place where you might feel like you're doing everything right, where you're raising the kids and you're running the household and still feeling so lonely. You're not enemies. You're not even distant enough to justify a crisis conversation. But the spark, that pulse of closeness that you used to feel is now faint. This is what I call the in-between. And it can be one of the hardest places to live in as a couple. Because at least if we're in a clearly bad phase, the entire situation screams. Whereas in the in-between space, it's a whisper. And if you're not paying attention, you can go on for years not realizing that what you're missing isn't sex or deep talks, it's recognition. You can go years doubting that feeling that something is just not right. Because in the end, if we're being honest, it's easier to ignore it, to suppress it, and pretend that it's just my imagination, that I'm just too demanding, that maybe I'm just too tired or cranky, and that's why I feel like something is off. It's easier than entertaining the idea that I may need something more, because that feels like opening a can of worms, Pandora's box. That if I discover that I need something that my partner can't give me, if I acknowledge it, if I say it out loud, if I ask for it, then I will no longer be able to pretend that I am fine in this current state of things. And what if my partner can't be or do that something that I need? Where does that leave us? So yeah, it's easier to pretend that that whisper isn't there until it becomes a scream. So in this gray zone during this parenting season of life, assuming that you want to avoid reaching that stage where the problem has to scream, what does intimacy look like? What can it look like? Well, if we're expecting the candlelit dinners and the date nights, if we're expecting spontaneous sex and deep conversations or emotional monologues, then we're bound to be disappointed. At this time, intimacy might be a shared glance in the hallway that says, we're in this together. Or a quiet smile during the bedtime chaos because you both know this moment is so absurd and sacred. It could be an admiration. It could be tiny compliments, an unexpected hand on the back while preparing dinner. This kind of intimacy doesn't require time or energy, but it does require presence and the willingness to look at each other with curiosity again. This might sound so simple that it appears superficial, but trust me, it isn't. If you're not convinced, think of a time that you were really angry with your partner. Were you really able to smile at them, to look at them with compassion, to hold them? It takes a certain kind of closeness, a certain kind of feeling of safety to be able to do these things that we think of as simple or easy. And when we do them, we not only reaffirm that we're close, but we enhance this closeness and we strengthen the bond. It's little, but it's far from insignificant. So having said that, you may be coming to the realization that you're not in that place where you can do these small but impactful things, but you want to get there. Well, if that's true, then I have 3 rituals for you that you can begin practicing, no scheduling required. The first ritual is admiration bingo. Each of you writes down 5 things that you admire about the other. Specific things like the way you stayed calm during our toddler's meltdown, or how you always have my coffee ready without asking. Over the next few days, name them aloud. No performance, just recognition. This can build warmth. And in long-term relationships, warmth is foreplay. Another activity that you can try that is surprisingly effective is a shared curiosity jar. Get a small jar or box and fill it with open-ended questions that each of you writes. Things like, what do you think your younger self would say about your life right now? Or, what is one small joy that you stopped giving yourself permission for? You could ask, when do you feel most desired? Once or twice a week, make a note of pulling one out at random. Answer it over coffee or in bed or while you're folding the laundry. This creates novelty without the pressure. Finally, you can do a sensory memory recall. Sit together for 5 minutes and recall a sensory memory from early on in your relationship. It could be a moment from a trip, your first apartment, or a quiet night in. Talk about how it smelled, what music was playing, what you were wearing, what you felt about your partner, what you felt in your body when you looked at your partner and your partner looked at you. Let yourselves remember, not to recreate, but to reconnect with the energy of those moments. Desire isn't always about the future. Sometimes it's about remembered aliveness and connection. As this episode comes to a close, I want to leave you with this truth. You guys might be closer than you think, but you've stopped noticing what closeness looks like in the now. You're measuring it with old tools, old standards, and they just don't fit this version of your life. Connection now is quieter, but it's no less real. It's in the glances, the inside jokes, the trust that keeps you both rooted. And if you let yourself see it, you'll realize intimacy never left. It just changed form. So, if you want to take this a step further and make it more actionable as you can, for one, choose at least one of the rituals that I just mentioned above. Give it a shot this week. But if you want all of what we discussed today to really sink in, to become more you can reflect and journal on this prompt. What does intimacy mean to me right now? And what would it feel like if I let that be enough? Avoid trying to find a solution. Avoid any tendency to want to fix things, to force things, and instead just notice what is already there and let it matter. Let it not be problematic. If this episode resonated with you, I've put together a beautiful bonus guide called Intimacy in 5 Minutes. It's a collection of tiny, repeatable rituals to bring emotional connection back into your daily life. Check the show notes or the description below to access it. When you do, you also sign up for my love letter, the Sunday Reconnect, which is my free weekly email with one insight, one tool, and one short 3-minute reset that fits into the busy parent lifestyle while tending to the part that wants to reconnect, both with oneself as well as with each other. So head on over to markelakaplani.com and check all of this out. Oh, and next week, I am joined by Dr. Randall Alifano to continue this conversation. He's a psychologist, a spiritual guide, and someone whose words feel like poetry and permission rolled into one. This conversation is less about fixing disconnection and more about rediscovering the mystery of emotional intimacy, especially after we've started seeing love as yet another task to manage. We will talk about what keeps love alive, how we unknowingly may be blocking intimacy by trying to control it, and what happens when we finally stop performing and instead start listening to our relationship. I walked away from this conversation feeling more human, and I think you will too. It's a rich, warm, and really practical sharing of insights, and I cannot wait for you to hear it with me, for you to join us. Until then, thank you for listening. Thank you for choosing presence even when it's hard. Take care, and I'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.